So the title of my presentation is Lay of the Landing Page. You might be wondering, what is a landing page and how does it apply to Tableau? Well, you're in luck. That's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into all that, I just want to thank everyone for inviting me to speak today. Tableau landing pages are something that have kind of become my thing and something that I'm pretty passionate about. So always excited to talk about them and speak to different user groups and meet all of you. So before we get into everything, here's a little bit more information about me. So I am a data viz developer and analyst at Booz Allen Hamilton. I'm based out of our headquarters in the Washington, D.C. area. I just celebrated my year anniversary there, so that's exciting. On the side, I actually am a college soccer referee, so I've been doing that since I was 14 and have worked my way up to the collegiate level, which is pretty exciting. Other than that, I am a Pittsburgh sports fan, so go Steelers, go Penguins. I went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, so big Pittsburgh guy. On the side here, I have some of my dashboards that I've done recently. So there's my visit of the day, the time we have, and also included in today's presentation on landing pages, you'll see an example of the NCAA one that I did recently. So that's a little snippet on the top there, but that's a little bit about me. You can follow me on Twitter at ReadySetData. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or just send me a message on Twitter. I'm super excited to talk with all of you, answer any questions that you have, or just talk more about the Tableau community. So here are our objectives for today. We're going to talk about how this idea came about, how did it get started. We'll go over some definitions of a landing page, when we should use one, some important components to consider when building a landing page, and then we'll go through some examples and where I draw a lot of my inspiration from. Make this full screen for everybody. So, like many of you, this is what a lot of my dashboards look like at work. This is all Superstore data, but you know, it ends up being a lot of crosstabs, nothing too flashy or fun looking, because that's what a lot of people like. They like to build everything in Tableau and unfortunately export it out to Excel and do their own thing with it, or at least that's my experience. But we had this dashboard at work that was pretty important to a lot of people. There's about 7 to 10 workbooks, or I'm sorry, dashboards in that workbook, and just millions of rows of data, tons of data in there. And it's not always important to everybody. Some person might be looking for a specific ID or customer or something like that. But you know, we had this whole workbook that had all of this data, and we were just throwing our users into it, pretty much saying, here, filter it down to, you know, use these filters on the side and go from there. But we really weren't giving them any information, not, you know, helping them in any kind of way or prompting them how to use it. So that's kind of how this idea started. We wanted to create something that welcomed our users to our set of dashboard, something that had some important links, maybe to email us or reach out to our help desk, or maybe a link out to a data dictionary, something that provided context on the data they're about to consume, and something that had a cool look and feel to it. So all of that led to our first landing page. So here we have Super Caesar Store. These are our custom order reports. And I just want you to keep this image in your mind. We're going to dissect this and go into a little bit more detail. But one of the first questions I got when I shared this out was, what did you make this in? Well, this is 99% Tableau. It has a combination of floating and tiled containers in it. Shout out to Katie there. But most of this is all in Tableau. There's a few things from PowerPoint, but this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying a landing page. So I'm going to go through some definitions. I'll share with you my definition of a landing page, and then we'll go into a little bit more of the details of this workbook. So the simplest definition is the first page you land on after clicking a link. Pretty straightforward. I like that definition. But the one that I really like is the marketing definition. And that definition is a web page that is designed to take web traffic and convert visitors in a particular way for a particular reason. I really like this one because when I think about my audience and my users, it might consist of people that aren't super familiar with Tableau. And I don't want to just throw a bunch of data at them and scare them away, where they email me and say, hey, can you just send me the data so I can do my own thing? So I think it's really important to kind of have that that really nice user interface to our dashboard sometimes. So it's more familiar with our end users and they know what to click. They know how to filter. They know that if they see this icon, it will do this thing for them. So I really like that definition. And then there's the not a homepage definition, and this one's more for fun. I found in my research that in the marketing community, there's some debate over a landing page versus a home page. Personally, I don't really care. You can call it a landing page or a home page. You can call it whatever you like. If you want to call it something different, that's awesome too. But I like to go with the landing page definition. So after I saw these different definitions, I learned more about how these things should work. I created my own Tableau specific definition. So my definition of a landing page is the first dashboard in a workbook that a user will see that captures their attention and provides them context on the data they are about to consume. So the most important thing for me on this definition is it's always going to be the first dashboard in a workbook. So many people, if you're thinking of a landing page, maybe you're thinking of a custom portal that you've created to place over your Tableau server or something like that, which is totally awesome. It's something that we do as well, and it's really cool. But what I'm talking about here is always going to be a workbook within a dash. It's always going to be a dashboard within a workbook, and it will always be the first one. And then sort of like the marketing definition, something that captures our attention, gives them information on the data they're about to consume, and kind of welcomes them to our dashboard. So that's my definition. And like I said, really important to remember that that's always going to be that first dashboard. When should we use one? I like to use landing pages when I have about maybe 3 or more, or maybe 5 or more dashboards, and that could be all around the same data. So something that's related, maybe it's the data, the topic, the department, or maybe it's a location or a region. So I like to use them when I have something that's related. But sometimes we don't always need landing pages as well. There might be times when we have those CEO, C-suite level type of dashboards that are more summary level, with the cool donut charts and the big bands on the top, right? And sometimes we really need a landing page for that, but there still are other ways that we can provide context to what our user is looking at. And I like to use the show hide containers for that. So I think that's a feature that came out in 2018.3. I've seen a lot of really interesting things on Tableau Public using show hide containers. I do have an example today that I'll go through, but using that feature, I think, is a really nice way to add context to those dashboards that might not have all those dashboards, so we don't need to technically have a landing page for them. Some components of a landing page. These are, you don't need to use everything here, but these are some of the more important things that I like to include. So everything that's underlined is somewhere circled on the right side. So first I'll talk about the main headline and the supporting headline or description. So right away, I know that when I open up this workbook, I come to this landing page and I'm looking at our customer order reports. It's the first title I see, it's the biggest thing there. And so I know that that's what this dashboard is about. Then underneath that, I have my supporting headline or description. So maybe somewhere in there, I have how often this data is refreshed. Or maybe I have some really important data definitions. Maybe not all of them, but some of the big ones that are important. Maybe I have some information in there about who the dashboard owner is, or who the data source owner is, or something along those lines. But just adding a little bit more context to it so my user knows what they're going to be looking at. Then I really like to include my company branding and our organization logo into my dashboards. I think it's something really important. If you're doing all this work on a dashboard, you want it to be yours. You want it to look like your company's colors. You want it to have that look and feel, or your clients, right? So make it yours. So most of your organizations all have some type of approved marketing branding guide. And in that branding guide, it'll have things like your approved colors. It will have your approved fonts, all the approved logos. So use that in your dashboards. So I've created a custom color palette using our approved logo, or our approved color palette for Booz Allen. So that's in all of our dashboards, and we try to stick to those colors. That way it looks and feels like our dashboard. One thing to keep in mind is when you're going with types of font, you might want to make sure that it's compatible on both Windows and Mac. We ran into that issue where I thought a certain font type was compatible on Macs and it wasn't, and when it showed up, it looked terrible. So maybe sticking to those Tableau fonts is the best way to go. And then finally, I have on this one contact information. So in the top right, we kind of have the links that look like a website where you can click. So maybe it'll take you to the team webpage, a link to email your team or the help desk, and then a link out to the documentation. So really, really nice feature. And you can see that when we look at this, it kind of looks like a website. It has that look and feel to it. So like I said earlier, I think when we kind of design with our user in mind and keeping in those best practices and the modern UI feel, it makes our users more comfortable with everything, and they're not scared of the data that they're kind of just being thrown at. Then on this one here, some of the things that I like to include are high-level filters and supporting images. So first with the high-level filters, we can see that on this one I have the quick search circled. What I'm looking at here is basically a way for my user to filter down the data before they get to all of it. So I mentioned that this workbook had millions of rows of data in it. And rather than having that load for all of our users and maybe showing them things that they really didn't care about, we allow them to search for a user or an ID right off of this quick search. So this is our landing page, right? And I will demonstrate how this works later, but you could type in a name. That table will update with what you searched for, and then using actions, dashboard actions, you can click on it. It will take you to the next dashboard in the workbook, and it will be filtered to what you searched for. So really nice feature to have to kind of limit down the amount of data that you're showing to your users. And then finally, I said we wanted to have a cool look and feel to it. So I added these super awesome data-like area chart hills. I don't know what you want to call them, but all I did was make those in PowerPoint and bring them in as images. So just how we can add a little bit of flair to our dashboards to make them a little bit more familiar. And then in blue, I have underlined high-level key metrics and intuitive navigation buttons. So the high-level key metrics were suggested to me by Joshua Smith, who was an IronViz contestant and co-winner at this past Tableau conference. And he suggests that maybe on the landing page, rather than having users have to click through the workbook to look at everything, you could have indicators on the front page, on the landing page here that says, okay, report 1 is good, report 2 is good, but report 3, you might want to look at that one because it increased by this much percent or it decreased by this much percent. So I thought that was a really good idea. I do have an example of that one, but I wanted to thank Josh for suggesting that one. And then finally, intuitive navigation buttons. So in one of the examples I'll bring up, we'll see how I use the navigation buttons that Tableau came out with. Really nice feature to kind of jump to the report that you're looking for rather than having to search through the whole dashboard for it. So now we're going to get into some examples and inspiration. So believe it or not, I get a lot of my inspiration from Pinterest. I like to think that my head is filled with great ideas, but unfortunately it's not. So I do go to Pinterest because, as you can see, I search landing page and I got a lot of really great ideas right away. So if you're looking for inspiration or you're having trouble or you have that viz block and you're not sure where to go to Google, go to Pinterest specifically if you like. And search modern UI, search landing page, search homepage, things like that. And you should be able to get a lot of good ideas. So even when I'm building just dashboards for fun or anything like that, this is kind of where I go to get my inspiration from. Now we're going to get into some examples. So the first one that I have here is the Superstore one, the original one that we created. And like I said, many people thought that this was created in something else, but no, this is 95% Tableau except for these images here. How I added the shadows, these are just floating containers. So I have a light rectangle floating over a dark rectangle. So that's how I added the shapes. But pretty much how I was explaining the quick search on in the one example is I could come in here, I could search for my name, or maybe I search for an order ID. I can look for the Eric that I'm looking for. So I'm going to select Eric Hoffman. And if I built out the rest of the dashboard to this, how this would work is I could click on it and it would filter down to the order ID that I've selected here. So really nice feature if you have tons of data and you want to give your users the option to filter down and make their data set a little bit smaller. And then just to talk about it again, we have some of our important links here. We have our supporting description, and we use some of our company logos and branding. So shout out to Caesar for letting me use his name for Caesar Superstore. The next example I have is the show hide container option. So this one isn't technically a landing page, but this is that option of where, or the situation where we have that CEO high level dashboard. This was created by Timothy Manning of the Data School. So I want to thank Timothy for letting me use this. But what we have here is you can see we have our donut with our sales, and we break it out here into our different categories, and we have some more information here, but really high level stuff. But what he's done is he's added this info button. So if we click on it, we'll see that a container popped up that gives us more context about our data, right? So we know that if we use these filters to the right, that it'll filter the rest of our dashboard. If you didn't know this, you can lasso around these customers to filter the dashboard as well. And then these numbers will update as we select things. So I wanted to put this one in here because, like I said, we don't always need a landing page for our workbooks, but using this show hide container, it's a really nice option to provide that extra context to our data and let our users know, what they can do on our dashboard, maybe what certain things mean or how they function. So want to thank Timothy for creating this one. Next, I have our Betzendahl Health Center chronic disease reports and dashboards. So this is named for Lindsay Betzendahl. She runs Project HealthViz in the Tableau community. But I really like this one. My background is in healthcare actually, so this one was fun to make. But again, just to point out some of the components I mentioned before, we have our main headline and our description here. We have our company logo. We have some of those important links at the top that will take us out to our hospital home or another link to email us. We have a nice supporting image here of our friendly doctor talking to his patient about his chart. And then we have our intuitive navigation buttons. So this one doesn't have any filters or anything on it, but say I manage our diabetes department and I really only care about that chronic disease and everything that's going on there. I can click this button and it'll take me right to that report. So rather than me clicking around through these other ones that maybe I necessarily don't care about as much, I can jump right to the report that I'm looking for and get to that a lot quicker. So just some like little things that we can do to make our users feel more comfortable. Again, this is mostly all created in Tableau, except for these buttons. These were created in PowerPoint, which I should be able to show in a little bit. But yeah, just another example here. Next, I have our social media dashboards. So again, using these high-level intuitive buttons to kind of click through, say I'm only interested in our Instagram data, I can go there. I have our supporting image, some of our icons that link out to important links. Again, our main header and description. And then over here, I just have some other menu items. So if you have a nice organized Tableau server environment, maybe you want to navigate to some of these other project folders that have more dashboards in them, and you could do so through these links. So again, just kind of creating that user interface within our Tableau dashboards to make them feel a little bit more welcoming and provide more information on our data. And finally, I have our ATUG Finance Incorporated financial dashboards. I'm a member of the ATUG, so I like to represent them as much as I can. But this one incorporates the high-level key metrics that Joshua Smith suggested. So we can see that at the bottom, I have some information here about our different reports within this dashboard. I can see that reports 2 through 4 are pretty okay, but then my report 1 had a huge decrease in something that I'm measuring here. So maybe I should go look at that one. So this one I think is a really nice report. Maybe you're checking these daily or something like that, but you really don't need to go through everything to see if things are all right. This is a nice way to kind of pick out those important measures that you care about, represent them on your landing page. That way you know if you need to go back into the report and dive a little bit deeper into what's causing an issue. I also have some buttons here to go to the data source. So maybe run a big self-service environment for your users. Perhaps you have some approved published data sources that you can use. Having a button like this allows the user to go right to the data source and start web editing and building out their own analytics if they need. So how to build a landing page. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I'm actually not sure how much time I have left, but I'll go relatively quickly. So Tableau desktop for sure. That's where I use a lot of floating containers and text objects, but keeping in mind that certain things are compatible on Windows and Macs. I use PowerPoint to create some buttons and shapes and use custom fonts and things like that within Tableau. And a newer trend that I've been seeing a lot of people use, which I've played around with a little bit, is Figma. It's an online interface design application. It is free. Say if you don't have Illustrator or something like that, you could use Figma, to add different, shadows and paddings and colors. It's a really nice tool, and I've used it in a lot of my dashboards more recently. And then again, Pinterest for inspiration. So just kind of a little quick demo here, but how I created my buttons, really simple, just using some shapes in PowerPoint. So I have my container here with my COPD report. I have my icons coming from Flat Icon, and I put them into my little circle here. And then all you have to do is highlight it, right click, and save as a picture. And so that's what I've done. And then I brought that into Tableau as a button image. That way I can assign it to navigate to a dashboard. Again, here we have our buttons from the social media one. So these ones are pretty simple. It was just a big rectangle within a smaller rectangle, or a smaller rectangle within a larger rectangle that has a thick white border. I have my icons from Flat Icon and a text object. And again, I just highlight the object, right click, and save as a picture. And then again, I brought that in using the button object and changed it to an image within Tableau. Going back to Tableau, it's a lot of the stuff, like I said, I've just done, floating things within Tableau. So here we can see that I have a square here, a floating container here to kind of create that white space. So there's nothing too tricky. It's just kind of coming up with those different modern UI things that we can do to make our dashboards look like that. So nothing entirely tricky, but just a lot of little floating things to kind of make it, have that modern UI design to it. And the final example that I have of a landing page is one that I created actually over the weekend. And this one, I was playing with some sports data, and this one is a lot different than what we looked at. This one is more for fun, right? With this one, just has our intuitive navigation buttons on it. So here we have our main title, some descriptions over here, some supporting images, and some information about me. And then if I go into presentation mode, I forget what the keyboard shortcut is to click, I can click on these buttons that will take me to the dashboard. And then I also have some other intuitive navigation buttons here, so I could go back to home, or I could hit the next arrow to go to our next one. So if you can picture this without the sports data, this might be a good use for some of your dashboards at work. But yeah, this was just a fun one that I did with all the different buttons. All right, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. So again, my definition of a landing page, it's always going to be the first dashboard within a workbook that a user will see that captures their attention and provides some context on the data that they're about to consume. So we want our users to feel comfortable with our dashboards. We don't want to scare them away with tons of filters, tons of lines and bars and charts and all this extra stuff. So maybe give them that landing page so they know what they're about to get into. They know the data that they're going to see, some important definitions and things like that. We want to use them when we have a group of related dashboards. If not, we can use that show hide container for maybe those CEO summary dashboards. And then always, again, I mentioned this, try to brand your dashboards, make them yours, use your approved company colors and logos to really give them that UI feel that is specific to your company or your clients. So thank you again to the Atlanta and North Texas Tableau user groups for inviting me to speak today. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I'd love to answer any other questions that you might have outside of here. Or if you just want to connect and talk about Tableau, please reach out. But thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion on landing pages.